Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Wednesday, May 28th. Gonna finish off the show today by continuing on with my Big Ten Power Rankings, and we're at number 6 now, so we're getting closer to the end. But I think my number 6 team, it's got to be Michigan. So the Wolverines, they had a really intriguing 2024 season, I would say. Super up and down, kind of disappointing. The quarterback play was really rough throughout the year, but they kind of bounced back at the end of the season. I had that monstrous upset over Ohio State and Columbus, that 13-10 win during rivalry week. And then you also had the upset of Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl. So kind of putting an exclamation point on the end of the season for Michigan. You do lose a couple of key pieces here. You lose Mason Graham, you lose Kenneth Grant, 2 first-round defensive linemen. You also lose cornerback Will Johnson, who was a projected top 10 pick at one point. Makari Page is gone. Josiah Stewart also gone on that defensive line. You lose Khalil Mullins as well as Donovan Edwards in that backfield for the running back position. You also lose tight end Colson Loveland, first-round pick as well, and offensive lineman Miles Hinton. All big losses for Michigan, but there's a plus. You have a ton of returning starters. You have 13 returning starters for Michigan, third in the Big Ten. A lot of guys coming back. Davis Warren's still on the roster at quarterback. Kendrick Bell, Peyton O'Leary, Max Bredson, Marlon Klein, both tight ends, pass catchers. Those guys are all back. You have 3 offensive linemen returning in center Greg Crippen, right guard Giovanni El Hadi, and right tackle Evan Link. So at the minimum, that right side of the offensive line has some continuity coming back. Then on defense, Jayshon Barham is back for that linebacker DN kind of hybrid role. Ernest Hausman back patrolling the middle of that defense. Derek Moore also back at linebacker. Then you have Zeke Berry and Jair Hill both returning, as well as Rod Moore returning from injury this year. So there's a lot to be positive about, I think, with Michigan's football team this year. Think of how horrible their season went last year, how poorly things went. Despite all of that, Michigan still won 8 games last year. They still beat Ohio State, the national champion, and Alabama, a top 15 team in the country. Yes, they do lose some absolute studs on defense. You lose Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. Those are some studs on that defense for the Wolverines. But if the offense kind of improves this year, which it would be surprising and shocking to see their quarterback play be worse than it was last season. You bring in Bryce Underwood and Mikey Keene, both upgrades over any of the quarterbacks that played for the Wolverines last year. If the offense improves a little bit and the defense kind of retools successfully, because you still have a lot there on defense. You have Rayshawn Benny, Ernest Hausman, Rod Moore returning. There's still a lot of really good pieces here on that defensive side of the ball for Michigan. So if they're able to retool successfully on that side, and if the offense is able to get a little bit better, how far really is this team away from winning 10 games or more? They're a lot closer than people think. I think last year kind of put a weird taste in everybody's mouth, just coming off that national championship run the year before. Yes, they lost a lot of pieces, but I think the decline kind of just painted a bad picture, I would say, for Michigan, for kind of their future prospects overall as a program. This is still a really good football program. This is still a team that has a lot of talent across the board, and I think they're going to be really solid and really plucky and tough to beat. However, I think Indiana's better than them. I think Indiana's the 5th team in the in the Big Ten this year. The big question: what do they have for an encore? Spotlight is going to be on them, on head coach Curt Cignetti, after their run to the college football playoff last season. This team is going to look different, but if they can kind of avoid a letdown, perhaps they can prove they're on their way towards contending year in, year out. Really? Indiana? I don't know. It'd be kind of fun, though. But look at their roster still. You lose Curtis Rourke, yes, who was a really great quarterback for you in year one of the Curt Cignetti experience at Indiana. But you bring in a guy who I think is an absolute stud at quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, former Cal quarterback, a guy that really kind of showcased that he's just a gamer. I think with more talent around him, he's going to be even better this year at Indiana. So you have probably a quarterback upgrade. You have a really strong offensive line. Carter Smith's returning as that incumbent left tackle. Bray Lynch is probably going to be their left guard. You bring in Pat Coogan from Notre Dame to be your starting center this year. Khalil Benson returns after a year at Colorado. And then you have Zen Mikulski coming in from Ohio State to take over that right tackle position. This is probably going to be a strength of that team. D-line, a little shaky. You lose C.J. West, you lose James Carpenter, you lose Linnell Carr Jr., but you return Mikhail Kamara. That's the big name. This guy is one of the best defenders in the Big Ten, if not the entire country. A guy that, when you look at his stats from last year, absolutely incredible. Could be even better this year as he moves into this kind of hybrid edge position. You look at their targets then too. Elijah Surratt still back as the number one wide receiver after a really great year last year. E.J. Williams also back, giving Fernando Mendoza two reliable targets that he can go to at any point in time. You do lose your two running backs from last year, your two top running backs in Justice Ellison, Tyson Lawson, but you have Kalen Black returning. You also have Ronan Hemby coming in from Maryland, Lee Beebe Jr. coming in from UAB to kind of make up for those losses. Not really sure who's going to be the main ball carrier here for Indiana, but all really solid options, all guys that could potentially get carries for the Hoosiers. This is going to be an interesting team. I don't know how they're going to do, honestly, this year. I don't see them being worse than 8-4, though, in the regular season, honestly. I think Curt Cignetti is too good of a coach. I think there's too much returning talent. Yes, their schedule's a little rougher this year, but even if you drop a couple more games than you did last season, you're still in a really good spot. I think this is probably about an 8-9 win Indiana team. I think they're going to be a little better than Michigan. I think those two are probably going to be right about on the same level. But Indiana, you got to start putting some respect on their name. I think they're certainly going to be a potential college football playoff contender, maybe earlier in the season. We're going to see, though, but I think 5 right now is a pretty good spot to have them at. Then at 4, I think it's got to be Illinois. Got to start putting some respect on Illinois' name, I think. I think Illinois is probably this year's version of Indiana from last season. Kind of seems to be a popular sentiment, popular opinion, but I just think that's probably the case. You look at, they went 10-3 last year, 6-3 in Big Ten play. You have a bunch of returning starters. You have 76% of your returning production, 3rd in the FBS ranks, including a third-year starting quarterback in Luke Altmaier, a guy that's probably one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. Gabe Jack is returning to kind of patrol that defensive side of the ball. A couple offensive linemen returning, a couple guys in the secondary returning. There's a lot here. They won 10 games last year for the first time since 2001. And Brett Bielema is still kind of pushing to the next level right now. He said he still thinks Illinois is not getting enough talk as a potential college football playoff contender. I think that's fair, though. You have all 5 starting offensive linemen returning here. You have the entire secondary returning. And, again, you have a third-year starting quarterback. You have a star linebacker. There's a lot of pieces here. And if they can kind of all mesh together well, this is going to be a scary Fighting Illini team. Finding new playmakers at wide receiver, that's going to be a big focus. Who kind of steps up there? You have Malik Elzy as a potential starter, but it's going to be kind of interesting to see who actually ends up being one of the starting wideouts for the Fighting Illini this year. Hudson Clement also, too, from West Virginia. That's another wideout that I think could really get some playing time this year. They also added a handful of options on the defensive line to try and kind of supplement that secondary and Gabe Jackas. But adding to that defensive line, figure out who's actually maybe going to start, get some playing time there. That's also going to be a big concern here. And also another kind of factor, Josh McCray, their leading rusher, did leave in the spring portal for Georgia, but you still have two solid options there at running back for Illinois. And Josh McCray also only had like 600 yards last year. So yes, that is a loss, but I don't think that's a huge loss for Illinois. You look at their schedule too. It's a lot more manageable than Indiana. Your biggest road matchup might be at Duke or at Indiana. These two are going to have to play each other. Potentially Washington. Then you get Ohio State and USC at home. Ohio State having to go to Illinois. I think that's going to be a more underrated Big Ten matchup this year. Then you also avoid Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon. So you don't have to play any of those three. Your toughest matchups are Ohio State at home and probably Indiana. But there are 9 Big Ten opponents for this year. We're combined 33 and 48 in league play last year. Only Indiana and Ohio State among their Big Ten opponents had winning conference records last year. This is a manageable slate for Illinois. This is kind of the point of the roster to where this might be the last hurrah with this current iteration of the Illinois Fighting Illini. This is their year. This was their time. The schedule is manageable. They can make a push. I think it's just a matter of time right now. But that's why I think I have Illinois as the 4th best team in the Big Ten. So with that, we are going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe, like, and follow the show. And if you want, you can also go to gsmcpodcast.net to tip, donate, leave a comment or question there. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to